Alright, welcome back to Let's Play Eden Visual Novel. I need to adjust my chair real quick. There we go. So, anyway, let's continue more of this. We didn't say a word to each other when we returned home. We just laid side by side in bed, not sleeping but not talking about anything either. We held each other's hands upon that narrow bed, looking up at the ceiling and gazed at each other. Occasionally kissed. We leisurely spent that calming, simple time together. We were shrouded in a mysterious euphoria, like we'd remembered something very precious. What put an end to that time was the sound of Shion's stomach.
でも
3日も何も食ってなかったもんな、シオンは。
3 days. I lightly kissed her cheek as she shyly hung her head.
何か食べるものを用意してくる。どうする？今の方で食べるか？
ここに持ってきて。
了解だ。
I kissed her once more, this time on the lips, and stood up.
早く戻ってきてね。
あ。
On reflex, I reached for the handgun beside my bed.
うん。
I drew my hand back. Well, there's no point of getting out that handgun since there's no one around to harm you, just only you two. Alone on the world, of course.
りょう？
いや、なんでもない。
Guns were no longer necessary. Shion and I were the only two on the planet, and no kidding. No longer was there anything or anyone who would threaten her. From now on, I just had to be by her side. That alone would be enough. Unless there are any wild animals around. Returning quickly was a top priority, which meant there was no time for hesitating. Shion probably couldn't eat all that much, and strangely enough, I wasn't all that hungry either. We had plenty of rice, and I found some salmon flakes after quickly looking through the shelves.
鮭のおにぎりでいいか。あとは山菜も少しあるから細かく刻んで混ぜよう。
Sounds delicious. 2 kinds of rice balls and some pickled vegetables ought to do it. I could always open another can if it didn't look like it was going to be enough. With that decided, I got right to work. I decided to boil some water first and grabbed the kettle. I quickly had 5 rice balls ready, prepared some pickled vegetables and warmed tea, and returned to the bedroom. However, the room was empty. For a moment I wondered if her having woken up had all been a dream. That couldn't be possible. I distantly remembered how soft she was when I hugged her, and how her lips felt against mine.
シオン。
I set down the tray somewhere within reach and immediately left the room. Well, she's not there. Not here. Well, not here in the bedroom. In her bedroom, of course. Not here either. Not in the bathroom. There was one place left. As I went outside, a chilly wind blew against me. I noticed the temperature had been dropping lately, but the difference at night, compared to earlier, was remarkable. The surrounding climate might have begun changing as well.
れどころじゃない。
I murmured and started to run, but immediately stopped.
シオン。
There she stood, a short distance away, unmoving, just standing there with her back to me. She stood so still, it was as if she wasn't even breathing.
シオン。
I tried to call out to her once more, but she didn't show any response. Oh boy.
どうしたんだシオン。こんなところにいたら風邪をひく。
I grabbed and tugged her shoulder.
何？
シオン。
When she turned around, her face looked like a blank slate. Her empty, hollow eyes sent chills down my spine.
呼んでいるの？
呼んでる？
一緒に行こうってみんなが。
シオン。
Shion's body shook violently, like she'd been struck by lightning.
りょう？
The light returned to her eyes. Her ordinary, slightly surly, yet deeply radiant eyes.
シオンだよな。
りょう、何してるの？
I was about to ask the same thing.
それはこっちのセリフだ。
She tilted her head, seemingly unaware of what was going on. Your hollow eyes look like you got possessed or something.
シオン、しっかりしろ。ここが現実だ。俺がいるここが君の現実なんだ。
そうか、そうだ。
I was a bit relieved to see her nodding over and over. I had thought this for a while now, but Shion might be far too sensitive for her own good. Her nerves were so hypersensitive, anything could trigger a reaction for her.
分かってる。私が普通じゃないことは。
普通じゃなくても構わない。だけど間違わないでくれ。
何を？
今この世界で君を呼べるのは俺だけだ。他の誰の声が聞こえても君は言ってはいけない。そこに行っても誰にも会えない。君はここで生きているんだ。そのことを絶対に忘れるな。
それでもどこかに来そうになったら私を引き止めてくれる？
As much as I can.
何度でも。
ありがとう。
If she only had a little more time remaining, I wanted her to be by my side when the end came, and I wanted to be by her side too. If we reunited with those who had already left us afterwards, I was sure it wouldn't be too late. Something was beginning to change. That much was certain. We could hear no birds chirping in the morning, nor the echo of the mountain stream that had ceased to flow, and the green leaves glistening with the previous night's dew had darkened. They were small, easily overlooked changes, but they were happening all around us. Ordinarily, she might have noticed these little details. Oh, there's a nice looking background here. You can see the incinerator. And I don't know what this brick thing is. Probably to store like burning logs or something. I don't know. However, that was probably impossible with the way she was now. Because what had changed the most these past few days was her.
Tadaima.
Though I knew there was nobody there to answer, I called out before I entered the living room, regardless. I placed the veggies I had harvested while out on my morning rounds onto the table.
最近、育ちが悪くなってきたな。
Maybe the world is at its limit. They were genetically modified to have a superior shape, taste, and rate of growth when compared to traditional vegetables too. All the same, it was more than enough for two. At least for now, anyway. There was some sort of strange buzzing sound. I looked around immediately, found the source of the noise.
すっかり忘れてたな。
Elika's radio. Elika's radio. We hadn't had any reception in a long time, so it was mostly for decoration. I could just turn it off, but the batteries would probably die soon anyway. May as well leave it be. For now, I decided to make breakfast. I picked out a box of pre-packaged stew from the shelf. Although we hadn't been able to bring in many vegetables lately, we had plenty of these preserved goods. It was ironic in a way that the food I'd prepared for when Shion was supposed to stay here on her own was now feeding mostly me. I decided to whip up an egg dish while heating up the stew pack. I cracked the eggs into a bowl, beat them, then stirred in salt and pepper. After putting some butter in the frying pan and heating it, I poured in the eggs and scrambled it all together.
こんなものか。
The flavor would be a bit lacking since we had no milk, but it was unavoidable. Don't you have any canned milk or anything like that? I put the scrambled eggs onto a plate and went to check on the stew. It looked like it was just about right. I knocked quietly, then entered Shion's room without waiting for her to answer.
おはよう。
There was no response from the master of the room laying in her bed. I set our tray of breakfast down somewhere handy for the moment and approached her bed.
シオン。
I addressed her once more. Still no reply. How many times have I repeated this very routine? I gazed at the peacefully sleeping girl.
もうそろそろ起きてもいい頃だろう。シオン。
I gently took her hand. She was a bit cold, and it seemed as though she had gotten a little thinner than before.
寝てばかりでちゃんと食べないからだな。
She ate more than matched her small frame when she was awake too. I began to softly stroke her hand. It was likely meaningless, but I couldn't help it. I wanted to do something, anything at all I could for her.
シオン。
はい。
I was taken by surprise and let go of her hand. Upon another glance at Shion's face, her eyes had certainly opened.
シオン。
何度も呼ばないの。
Though her voice was quiet and hoarse, she seemed fully lucid.
りょう、元気？
それは俺のセリフだ。
よかった。
よかった。
Shion cocked her head and looked at me with amusement.
眠っている間に世界が終わってなくてよかった。
もしも週末が来ても君が生きてる限り俺が死なせない。
りょうも死なない？
死んでたまるか。
不思議。
A fleeting smile crossed her lips.
りょうなら生き残れそうな気がする。世界の最後なんてどうでもいいことみたいに思えてしまう。本当に不思議。
The finale that had spent her life to oppose now was no longer of any concern. No matter what might happen, I would protect the peaceful time remaining to Shion, even if it cost me my life.
けど、よく寝た。
寝すぎだ、君は。
そう？
Her head moved slightly. It looked like she'd meant to tilt her head. It broke my heart seeing her in pain from such slight movements.
寝ている間に私にいたずらとかは？
してない。
It looks like her mind was already up and running, albeit in the wrong direction.
そう、してないの。
当たり前だろうが。
どうしても我慢できなくなったらしてもいいから。
君は俺を獣か何かと思ってないか？
男の人ってそういうものだって聞いた。
Yeah, right. I don't think all men do stuff like that.
君のそちら方面の知識はやや極端だ。
I don't know, it really depends.
そう？
そうだ。I knew she loved Elika, but it was a bit troubling how she ate up everything that Maid said to her.
だけどりょう？
いや、もうその話はいいだろう。
私、何もできないから。りょうが喜ぶなら何でもいいのに。
だったら一つ頼みがある。 もう少し早く起きてくれ。君が眠ってばかりだと退屈で仕方ないんだ。
りょう、ごめん。
Shion slowly raised her hand. Oh, I keep misreading it. Shion slowly raised her hand.
なんだか手が温かい。りょうが温めてくれたの？
それくらいしかできないからな。
I held her hand one more time. Both my hands wrapped around hers, gently yet firmly.
りょう、ダメ。
何がだ？
そんなに優しくされたら。なんでもない。
なんでもって。
I started to follow up, but held my tongue. When I saw the troubled look on her face, I couldn't speak any more. Being kind to her, giving her more memories, that might be a heavy burden for a girl nearing the end of her life.
りょう、私からもお願いがあるの。
ああ、何でも言ってくれ。
お風呂に入りたい。
え？
お願い。
Shion's smile looked just a little vicious. I set some iced tea on the table and Shion immediately took it in hand.
いただきます。
She drank it down immediately. She must have been hot after getting out of the bath.
おいしい。
そんなに感動するようなことじゃないだろ
おかわり。
一杯だけだ。冷たいものはあまり体に良くないだろう。そんな恨みがましい目をしてもダメだ。
最近のりょうはエリカに似てきた。
それは素直には喜べない評価だな。
I grinned and Shion, a little dejected, flicked the rim of her now empty glass with her finger.
まあでもいい。やっと一緒にお風呂に入ってくれたし。
This time it was my turn to be a little upset. I couldn't let her get in the bath alone in her condition. There was nothing we could do. I had no choice but to wash her hair and body for her.
嬉しかった？
She tilted her head and asked me without any expression on her face.
別に。
やっぱり私がこんな体型だから？
そういうことじゃない。 考えてみれば無理して風呂に入らずに体を拭くだけにしておけばよかったんだよな。
そんなの気持ちよくない。
あのな、そういえばなんでシオンは一人で入浴するのを嫌がってたんだ？
After she thought it over a moment, Shion's cheeks turned red for some reason.
髪を洗ってる時に後ろに誰かいるような気がするの。
普通というか、なんというか。それで以前は毎回エリカに付き合わせてたのか。
だって怖いものは怖いの。
She may have been pretty old, but she still had her childish tendencies. Setting aside her intellectual capacities, her mental age might just suit her appearance more.
寮にだって怖いものくらい。
She seemed to have noticed it too.
何か聞こえたな。
多分そのラジオ。
I turned my attention to the radio that sat where Shion was pointing. I too heard something other than static coming from it. Had the electromagnetic interference gone down? It had been a long time. Such a very long time.
一体どこから電波が。
I stood up, approached the radio, and adjusted the volume. I could hear something resembling music, but it was hard to make out with all the static mixed in.
どこかのラジオ局が無人のまま放送してるのか。もしかすると宇宙から衛星を経由して電波がここまで届いているのかも。
Technology has been improving on that.
Yoくわからないな。
This radio was always tuned to the station that broadcasted Elika's favorite musical program. Even if we tried tuning it to other stations, we just got static.
このラジオ自体も調子悪いしな。なかなか。
After a few minutes of adjusting the volume and tuning,
何か聞こえた。
聞こえたな。
I stopped adjusting it and listened close. Shion seemed to be focusing her senses in the same way.
綺麗な音楽。
そうだな。
Excuse me.
昔はまだ電波が普通に受信できた頃はこうやってエリカと一緒に音楽を聴いてた。
The peaceful music.
俺も一度エリカと一緒に聞いたことがある。
私にはもう遠くて懐かしい思い出になった。遠くて眩しいくらい懐かしい。
シオン。
Her eyes were slowly shutting. The strength left her tiny body, and her head jolted violently.
シオン。
あれ。
Then suddenly her eyes opened.
おかしい。
With a vacant whisper, she rubbed her eyes awkwardly.
シオン、眠いのか？
おかしい。たくさん寝て、さっき起きたばかりなのに。
シオン。
Perhaps she didn't even have the strength remaining to stay awake. Rather than recovering strength while she slept, could she actually be losing it?
せっかくここでの生活で体力がついたのに。りょう、山の様子はどうなの？
山？
Mountain. Like always, she abruptly switched topics.
本当のことを言って。
あまり良くない。草も木も畑の野菜も湖の魚も山のすべてが
死に始めてる？もしかしたら世界そのものが。
大丈夫だ。
I blindly declared.
もしこの山が死んでも他に行く当てはいくらでもある。俺とシオンの時間は逃げ出すことから始まったんだ。だからどこまでだって逃げてやる。
私は本当は逃げてはいけなかった。
Her tone changed. It was like flipping a switch. It had been quite a long time since she had been so explicit.
私が外の世界を夢見たりしなければ、エリカはもっと長く生きられた。私のためだけに生きてくれたエリカを、姉さんを殺したのは私。姉さんを刺したあの人を恨むことなんて最初からできなかった。そんな資格私にはない。私は私を守ってくれた人をみんな殺してしまう。姉さんだけじゃない。稲葉少佐も。
She knew that the Major was no longer alive? Keeping quiet about it must have been tough on her.
それに、あなたも、人を救ったつもりになっても、本当に大事な人を。 大事な人を傷つけ、失ってしまう。
Shion hung her head over the table, shoulders quaking. The room echoed with the pitter-patter of droplets.
シオン。
She was crying. I couldn't see her face, but the tears kept coming. The static-riddled music was the only other sound in the room. That beautiful melody now sounded helplessly melancholic.
君は誰も殺していない。
I held back my sorrows and spoke from the heart. If I didn't say it now, there would likely never be another opportunity to erase her regrets.
そしてこれからも誰も死なせない。シオン、君は俺に目的を与えてくれたんだ。
Shion quietly gasped.
ただなんとなく生きて罪を重ね続けて死んでいないというだけだった俺に本当に生きている実感をくれたのは君と過ごした時間だった。多分エリカも少佐も同じだったんじゃないか。君が作った船に乗って旅立った人たちもいる。君が生んだ希望が新しい世界でいつか芽吹く。
And Lavi and Maya will be there on mankind's new home. Those who had gotten to know Shion and died, and those who would live on, not one of them had or would ever resent her. I was sure that.
誰も後悔なんてしていない。それが自分の選択だったんだ。だから君も悔やむことなんてない。
違う。悔やんでるんじゃないの。
When she looked up at me, I could see her face was still wet from the tears. She stared straight at me, a look of dignity upon her face.
私はただ好きな人を守りたかった。
それじゃあ下ろすぞ。
With Shion in my arms, I slowly laid her down on the bed. Sitting in a chair in the living room was more than she could manage, so she had no choice but to go back to bed.
ありがとう。
気にするな。
I lightly brushed her bangs from her eyes. Shion giggled with embarrassment.
何か欲しいものはあるか？
ある。 手を握って。
そんなことでいいのか？
I grinned and took hold of her hand. She squeezed back weakly.
りょう、
ん？
さっきは泣いてごめん。
それも気にしなくていいことだ。
今のうちに全部言っておきたかったの。
そうか。
The window frame clattered quietly. The wind had picked up.
今日もいい天気。
そうだな。太陽の光だけは変わらないな。
本当に静か。
静かだな。
静かに終わりゆく世界で、私は最初で最後の恋をしてる。
She whispered to herself and gave a brilliant smile. Her smile felt fleeting and looked like it might disappear any second, but was so beautiful I could never forget it. I prayed from the bottom of my heart. For Shion's love, her happiness, to last as long as possible. I wanted her to live as long as she could.
シオン。
She had fallen asleep with the smile still on her face. Her hand was still tightly gripping mine. The sight of her breathing tranquility in her sleep, I adored it from the bottom of my heart. The end was definitely on its way. Both hers and the world's. But all the same, it would be great if an infinitesimal silver of hope could arise from this cruel reality. And so I prayed.
彼女が永遠に眠るその日まで。世界をそれからシオンは数日覚醒と睡眠を繰り返した。いつ目覚めるのか、そこに法則性はないようだった。一日で目覚めることもあれば、3日眠り続けることもある。シオンが目覚めた時に一人で寂しくないように、俺はできる限り彼女のそばに居続けた。眠っている間は手を握り、目覚めた時はとにかくいろいろな話をした。 たあいのない子供の頃の思い出をお互いに話して笑い合う。ささやかでとても満ち足りた時間が流れていった。彼女がまた眠りに落ちてしまうまで。そんな日々がしばらく続き、そして彼女
Not sure about this, so I'll end it here for now, so we'll continue the remaining part of the story later. So hope you guys enjoyed this. Please rate, comment, and subscribe, and I'll see you guys later. Have a good one.